Hi, I'm Callum from Retro Power. Since 2020 we've been doing a weekly walk around our workshop called the Uncut series, where we show the progress on the various projects we're working on. We thought it would be really cool if we edited together all the segments that relate to each individual project into one series, so you can actually follow the build of an individual project start to finish. So that's what we've done. Welcome to the Dream Car Build series. In the meantime, we've been working quite a lot on the Chevette this week. James has been doing the carbon trim panels. I mentioned last week, I think, that we were cutting those all from one big 8x4 sheet of carbon fibre that we had laid up. He'd already templated them, so it was a case of cutting them out and just tweaking and fettling until the fits are all perfect. That's looking really good now. We're going to get, it's got a temporary set of bolts just holding those in at the minute. We're going to have another set of bolts Xylan coated so it all looks black. And we've also got some little washers to go behind on the reverse face, because where the bolts go in, we've riv nutted where the original plastic trim clips go on the original car, and on the door frame they're actually recessed in by maybe a mil, so when you do the bolts up it kind of bends the carbon in slightly and gives a little bowed looking area around each bolt. So we're going to make some little, just glue in some little 1 mil thick nylon plastic washers around every one of those holes, just so when the bolts are done up, they still look nice and flat. So that's looking really good. Fuel tank has now gone in. Scott had previously made up the stainless steel straps that strap the fuel tank down. Clean those up, give them a nice brush finish, lined them with neoprene and line the area under the tank with neoprene. So then it was a case of just connecting the fuel hoses up, getting that tank in, getting it strapped down. Going through tightening all the fuel lines up. I mean, we're basically on the countdown to first fire up, so this week we've mainly been going through anything that relates to that first engine fire up, so getting all the fuel system fittings, making sure they're tight, getting the tank connected, getting the wiring connected. Yesterday, oh God, I've forgotten his name. I think it might be Chris from Bremax came over and dropped off the engine management wiring loom. Got that all into place loosely. There were a couple of bits he wanted to do in situ, so the coil packs, we're running Hayabusa coil packs on this Vauxhall C20XE because they fit into the original plug holes really nicely, and the height of them fits under the original plug cover. And he wanted to just check the orientation of those to get the plug angles to make sure the wires sat really perfectly on those before terminating them. So he's done that, got the engine management loom laid in there. So that's looking really good. So we're going to go around and just finish off some wiring, tidying up. John's been finishing the dry sump plumbing. There was one remaining pipe. The pipe that was originally supplied with the engine, that's the rear scavenge from the sump pan to the scavenge pump, was really tight on the steering rack. So we've switched that to being the other side. There's alternate ports on the dry sump pan the other side. So we've got it going out the other side now and round to the scavenge pump, which avoids that problem. That's basically the oil plumbing tied up, all the fittings tightened. James is just working on the mounting for the breather tank for the dry sump system. So dry sump tank is what you fill with oil. The pump that's in the scavenge pump that's basically constantly scavenging any oil out of the bottom of the sump pan also scavenges any blow-by on the piston. So that what would normally be your breather out of the cam cover is all scavenged out by the sump pump and basically blown back to the sump tank along with the oil. So that vapour has to go somewhere. There's an outlet at the top of the dry sump tank. That goes to a catch tank, which is there basically just to, it should never get any significant amount in it. It's just there in case any oil does blow out of the breather on the dry sump tank to catch it and stop it going all over the engine bay. So we're just making up some bosses to mount that onto the, basically piggybacked on the back of the recess where the tank itself sits. And he's just machining up some little spacers for the upper alternator bracket. So we've got a Wasp alternator on it, and their billet lower mount, and then it basically has a rose jointed turnbuckle for the top mount. But because of the articulation on the rose joint, you have to space it up slightly because you run out of articulation, and it basically stresses the rose joint when you pull the bolt down. So he's just doing that. So that will finish off the alternator. We're just about to get the battery in and do the battery power cabling and start clipping some of the engine management loom properly into place. Pretty much with the countdown to Monday. It's Thursday today. Hopefully get the majority of that done tomorrow. Then on Monday, Dave Rowe is coming over So he's reasonably well known in the sort of UK motorsport electronics circuit. He's got an awesome short wheelbase Quattro that he's run at Pikes Peak at least once. I'm not sure if maybe more than once. And he's involved in quite a lot of cool projects in the UK. Well, he's one of the Motec dealers in the UK. He supplied the Motec parts that are on this, and he's the man I would choose for when it comes to Motec programming. So he's coming over on Monday. He did all the initial ECU setup, program the PDM, and hopefully we'll go for first fire up. There's a few things we're going to do beforehand. We're going to crank the sump pump over and try and get some oil pressure on the engine, do a basic fire up of the electrical system so we can see that there is actually power to the PDM and the ECU and the Motec display. And if we're happy with all of that, he can then take over, hopefully go for first fire up, and then once we're happy that it runs and idles well and the basic electronics are all functioning, then it'll be ready for a rolling road session in a couple of weeks' time, where Dave will come back and do the full mapping session on it. So this is getting perilously close to being running, and perilously close to the point we can get everything buttoned up on the interior. And at that stage, it's getting really close to being done. We've just sent off a load of aluminium parts, which I think we failed to get any footage of, for anodising. So the rear lamp surrounds, might have got some footage of them before, but they've been machined from solid aluminium, and they've just gone for black anodising. Mounts for the Motec keypad also just gone for anodising. The front caliper brackets and disc bells have. There's probably some other bits I've forgotten as well. But yeah, getting there.
The Chevette, which is the bustling hive of activity at the moment. It's a busy times on this. Basically, the major push and the big leap is rolling road dyno session. Engine's been dynoed. Now the car has got to be dynoed again with the engine in on the rolling road dyno. That's what the current drive is towards. So there's been various jobs going on. Scott has finished off some aluminium fabrication for the cooling system, the lower coolant pipe, the lower main coolant hose. He's fabricated that. You may recall from previously that we've got George drew up on CAD some very nice sort of skeletal aluminium billet sections to support the Motec keypad, control keypad that we're using for the PDM. And you will have seen previously that was all machined and looking lovely. Well, that's now back from anodising. We've had that anodised now. We've had that looks absolutely stunning. That's all now been fitted in the car, and the keypad's now fitted to that instead of the temporary plastic 3D printed mount. Scott's also got the footrest in on the passenger side, because that's going to be tricky to get in later on once we've got seats and things in. It's much easier to get in at the moment. He's also done the throttle cables, got those fitted, and then there's things like we need bonnet catches, so he's fitted the aero catches to the bonnet so that we can actually latch the bonnet down, like that. And then the Bilsteins, the cars that we're using, turreted Escort, Bilstein adjustable platform, Group 4 dampers on the back, row jointed at the bottom with the threaded bodies, same as on a Group 4 Escort type damper. So we've got those on the back. They're now loosely fitted at the minute, will be fully fitted later once we've done a few more bits of toing and froing. James has just been making up side spaces in stainless steel for setting the panhard rod height on the axle casing. And I think prop shaft, yes. Sorry, that was a bit of a last minute thing because he's a very busy man. But we picked that up from John Mack at Dave Mack Props yesterday, I believe. We picked the prop shaft up for it, which is now half fitted at least. It'll be fully fitted later, but it's at least partially fitted at the moment. We're just waiting on some bolts. But yeah, the prop shaft picked up from Dave Mack Props. Always excellent service from them. So that's on. And yeah, the next phase then was Dave Rowe visiting to basically commission the full Motec electronics suite, basically doing all the PDM programming and dash programming so that the Motec dash and Motec PDM will then control everything and everything works. So now we have working lights, we have working cooling fans, we have working, the myriad. Carl's better to explain this than me because I'm not actually completely familiar with everything that's, how everything's programmed and controlled, but you know, things from your heated screen control through to the power feeds to the electric power steering assistance that the car's got. There's lots and lots and lots of things that are all controlled all via the PDM, because you have to remember on this car there's no fuses or relays. All the electrics and electronics are all controlled and fed via the Motec PDM unit that's on there. I'm not going to try and read out and tell you which model it is because I can't remember. Carl has said it previously. I can't remember which model it is now. So my apologies to Dave Rowe and Motec for not mentioning that, but I can't actually remember what it is. But yeah, everything is all controlled on the car electrically via the Motec keypad on the centre console, which is sitting on those billet mounts, and the programming on that is now all done. So the next stop really, and obviously then Dave's also then fired the car up with a loose, a rough map on the Motec ECU. He's then fired the engine in the workshop and just checked that everything's good, no leaks. All the installation is done okay and everything's working there. So yeah, Dave's fired that up. That's all good. Sounds nice and crisp and ready to go. So the next stage on that is getting it to the rolling road, which is early next week. So it's all hands to the pumps at the moment, finishing off a number of areas that need doing prior to rolling road trip. So yeah, watch this space. You'll hopefully be able to see a bit of footage of it under load on the rollers very soon.
Yeah. Right, ready?
Yeah, stand a little bit to the back of that, otherwise, yeah. Yeah, perfect. Ready when you are now.
I haven't thought about what I'm going to say at all. It's okay. Right, welcome to another Retro Power Uncut. And that was the awesome sounds predominantly of the Chevette on the rolling road. You may have noticed it's been a pretty intense few weeks with the Utah Jag going on the rollers, then the first fire up of this, and then this on the rollers. So it's been pretty non-stop, but last week we were basically on the final countdown to getting this in a state where we could take it to the rolling road. So the week before we basically had a list of everything we wanted to get done in order to do the first fire up and the electrical programming session with Dave Rowe. And then the week after that we had another list which was the next step of things that needed to be done for the rollers. That included things like fitting the prop shaft, fitting the throttle cables, which hadn't been fitted before when we did the first fire up. We wanted to get the brakes and clutch all plumbed in. Daft things like just getting a seat in there as well. We were wondering about the windscreen, but Dave did bravely say, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll map it with no windscreen." In which, given that Roger Clark's Rolling Road has an enormous blower at the front of the dyno cell, was quite a brave move, but that went fine. So yeah, we worked through all of that, got it down there, and it basically went as well as you could expect a rolling road session to go. My main concerns are always just that it doesn't blow up or go horrendously wrong, and it was great really. No leaks on the engine, no leaks on the gearbox, clutch worked fine, gearbox shifted fine, engine performed really well. We got a little bit of oil out of the axle breather at the end of the session, which we're just going to investigate. But yeah, it essentially went very well. It was a little down on the power figures we were kind of hoping for, but probably through 90% my own fault, in that I made the decision to map it on normal 95 octane E10 unleaded, which is startlingly different to 98 or 99 octane in terms of how much ignition advance you can run. Now I think what we're going to do is take it back down there at some point and do an alternate map on 99 octane that you can switch between the two maps, because it made about 250 horsepower, which is quite a lot, but it's certainly capable of making 290-ish horsepower. That's what it made on the dyno when it was run on 98 octane originally. So a little disappointed in that, but you know it pulled well. It was really strong. There's no issues with it. So I mean, I call that a huge success anyway. So really happy with that, and we're now in the position to just start going through the last bits. I'm going to get the headlining in next. That then opens up the possibility of getting the windows in. We're picking up the dash from being flocked tomorrow, so the dash can then go in. We've already got the carbon panels made to go in there. We can get the seats in for the final time. We're going to assemble the rear lights. We've got all the components for those now. We're going to make a sump guard for it, but really the list is quite small on this one now, so looking forward to doing that big final push on it.
Moving on then, we've got the Chevette, which you saw last week on the rolling road, on the dyno. So that was nice to see, it made some nice noises. Yeah, we're really happy with that. The peak power was probably a little bit less than we thought. There was a couple of complications there. The major one being, as Carl said, that we weren't running on is it 98 octane or 99 octane? Whatever the higher octane pump fuel is, we weren't running on that because the concern was that we want it to be able to fill up wherever. So it was running on the lower octane unleaded, which did drop the power a bit more than we thought it would actually. It wouldn't take nearly as much ignition advance as we thought it would. So we'll have a second go at that, and we'll run switchable maps on it so it can be switched to run on lower octane or higher octane. Then we've got a win-win out of that one. So that's fine. Scott's been doing some bits on this. He has been... I need to consult my little list because I've actually forgotten what he was doing. Yes. Separate to that, George has drawn up some door pulls. We're doing billet door pulls for the interior door handles on the doors on this. They've been drawn and machined and have now come back, and then they've gone off again today, off to the anodizers, because we've just done another black anodizing run. They've gone up to the anodizers to be anodized black. So they're progressing okay. The rear lights, of course, yeah, I'm having to look at my list because there's a lot going on and there's things I haven't been involved with. Yeah, the rear lights, we got the rear lights back on the previous batch of anodizing. They, again, long-term viewers will remember, we drew those up on CAD, had them machined from billet aluminium. Then the aluminium billet's been, they were trial assembled, then the aluminium billet has been anodized black, and we've had black, we've done black perspex covers for those, and then the light units are fitted inside there, and the covers are screwed on, and they've been fitted to the back of the car, and that's all exactly as we hoped. The screws that hold all that lot together are currently stainless steel. There is another set of screws which are being Xylan coated. We're starting to use Xylan coating on quite a few items. They're being Xylan coated black at the moment. Another set of screws for those. So then, and the body screws and various other things. So they'll all be black on the finished article. But at the moment they're at East Midlands Coatings being Xylan coated black. So that's right with that. And then Scott's also been busy putting on Dynamat in a few places as well. There were various places that had been done. He's been putting some Dynamat on the back of some of the carbon panels just to take a bit of resonance out of them, because some of them do have a little bit of a resonance to them. And a couple of areas where we hadn't put Dynamat, where he's just been adding Dynamat in there. And I think that probably covers most of what we've done on the Chevette. We're certainly getting towards the final parts of this. There's still things to do. We've still got the front light surrounds to be machined, finalised and then machined. There's various bits to do. We need to address an actual breather issue that came up on the rollers, so we're going to be doing that. There's still plenty to do, but we're getting through this quite well now. So yeah, good progress. Moving along behind camera, I'll sort of wander around here. Scott's been doing some bits on this. They're not the most photogenic parts because it's largely been packaging wiring behind the dash. The loom was done some time ago, but we've just got to the stage now where everything's connected, tested, which you've seen before. So now the wiring can all be put into its final locations, and all the mounting points and bosses and things that were all provided for earlier on in operations are now being used to mount all the various parts. So that's Scott's duty of today, plus finishing, doing final paint fettling, where all the excuse me, where all the cable runs and pipe runs run inside the car. The paintwork hadn't been finally fettled basically in those areas, plus there were little, very fine scratches and things from, not deep scratches, but just fine marks from general assembly work, where the paint can't be protected because there's clips and things in the way. So Scott's been going around taking clips off, just finalising paint finishing around there, and then refitting them, just generally titivating everything ready, because none of that will be accessible once the seats are in. We want to get all that done before all the actual final bits of the interior get put together. So that's what Scott's on with.
So Scott's working on this at the minute. Over the course of the last week, he's basically been buttoning up everything behind the dash with a view to getting the dash in. So the wiring loom needed quite a bit of work shuffling around because there's a lot of wiring behind the dash to try and get it reasonably out of view. It's one thing that is a bit more challenging on a motorsport build because there's no interior panel work to cover everything. The wiring needs to be really neat, otherwise it's kind of a bit of an eyesore. So he's been working on that. He's been getting the wiper motor connected up and the linkage on because that's all behind the dash. On these, the spindles are in the engine, on the scuttle obviously, but they go through the bulkhead, and the mechanism is behind the dash, and then the motor's actually in the engine bay. It's a bit of a strange arrangement. So the motor's in the engine bay with the spindle going through the bulkhead, the linkage is all behind the dash, and then the spindles themselves come back out onto the scuttle. So he's been getting all the linkage connected up behind there. He's been mounting the GPS sensor for the speedo, and he's just about to wire in the isolator button, which is the one remaining job electrically on the dash before he can actually get that in. So hopefully later today that's going to be going in. As a quick recap, it's essentially a standard Chevette dash that we've had flocked. A few people asked about flocking as well when I mentioned that before. So if you're not familiar with that process, it's basically spraying an adhesive, which is usually dyed the colour that you want the flock to be, onto the whatever it is you're covering, and then you spray electrically charged nylon fibres, which, because they're statically charged, they stand on end and stick into the adhesive and basically create almost like a velvety sort of finish, which is quite common in motorsport stuff. And it's just quite a nice way of giving a nice, even, matte-looking finish to an interior component. So that should hopefully go in later today. We've also just received the steering wheel, which I've been waiting, I think, 3 or 4 months for. So I can't wait to see that on, because we've had this scruffy old steering wheel in it for months now, and it'd be nice to see the final one in there. So hopefully we'll see that in there later today.